Hi everyone, welcome! Today we're going to explore a fascinating and often dark side of one of comics' most iconic heroes, Superman. We usually think of him as the ultimate symbol of hope and justice, but the DC universe is vast, full of alternate realities and what-if scenarios where things didn't quite turn out that way. Across the multiverse and various stories, we find versions of Superman who, through tragedy, different upbringings, or corrupted ideals, end up becoming villains. In this video, we'll be looking at 10 specific examples of these fallen Supermen. We'll explore their origins, what makes them different, and the circumstances that led them down such dark paths. Let's get started. Before we go into our explanation, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is a small click for you, but for us it means a lot. Thank you. Let's begin. Number 1. Overman. First up, let's talk about one of the darkest what-ifs in the entire DC multiverse. Picture this. The ship carrying baby Kal-El doesn't crash land in wholesome Kansas. No, it slams down in the Sudetenland region of Czechoslovakia in 1938, smack dab in the middle of the rising tide of Nazi Germany. And who finds this superpowered infant? None other than Adolf Hitler himself. Of course, he's the one who finds baby Superman. No surprise that from day one, this version of Kal-El is steeped in Nazi ideology, raised by the Führer himself. He grows up to become Overman, the ultimate weapon and the shining symbol for the Third Reich. He genuinely bought into the twisted vision of the supremacy of the Aryan race, and became so powerful, such a believer, that he was instrumental in winning World War II for the Nazis, helping them establish total global dominance on Earth. The history books must be fun to read after that, right? Speaking of his appearance, he still wears the classic Superman suit, but it is drained of all hope. It looks darker, often gray or even stark black instead of that familiar heroic blue, and the iconic S is warped. Sometimes it's something that looks like the jagged SS lightning bolts of the Nazi Schutzstaffel, and other times it's a stark Umlaut for Übermensch, the German word for Overman. Power-wise, nothing has changed. Unbelievable strength, blinding speed, flight, near invulnerability, heat vision, X-ray vision, super hearing, and freeze breath. His abilities are biologically the same as the main Superman we all know, but his actions are disturbing because they're more systemic and ideological. Number 2. Bizarro. Next up, we have Superman's most unique look, Bizarro. Now, figuring out exactly where this guy came from can get messy, because his origin story changes all the time, depending on who's writing him, but the main idea is always the same, that he's basically a messed up, imperfect copy of Superman. How does he come about? Sometimes he's the result of a botched cloning attempt, which is usually Lex Luthor's fault. Sometimes he gets zapped by some weird duplication ray, or sometimes he even comes from a planet called Hitre, which is Earth spelled backwards. Classic Bizarro logic right there. The point is, his creation is almost always an accident, a science experiment gone wrong trying to capture or replicate the Man of Steel's power. What they get instead is this incredibly strong being, but his mind is fractured. His sense of right and wrong is irreparably messed up, and works in reverse. He usually just wants to be like Superman, maybe even thinks he is Superman, but because his brain works backward, his attempts to do good or help just cause mayhem and destruction. But personally, the most interesting aspect of this Superman is his look. He's a funny and unsettling parody of Superman. His skin is a chalky white or maybe gray color, sometimes looking almost crystalline or like cracked rock. His face often looks blocky or distorted, like a bad sculpture. He wears a raggedy, ill-fitting version of the Superman suit, which makes you wonder if maybe the colors are swapped or maybe it's just faded and torn. Oh, and don't forget how he talks. That famously mangled opposite speak, me am Bizarro, saying goodbye when he hears hello, things like that. Power-wise, he's your regular Superman, but instead of heat vision that burns, he'll blast you with freeze vision. Instead of super cold freeze breath, he breathes fire and even creates a vacuum, sucking the air out of your lungs. He definitely gets the super strength and nigh invulnerability, and sometimes he's strong enough to go toe-to-toe with Superman himself, but he has absolutely zero control over it. Combine that raw, untamed power with his completely upside-down Bizarro logic, and you've got someone dangerously unpredictable. And blue kryptonite is his specific poison, which can actually hurt him. He's rarely driven by pure malice, not like some other villains who genuinely want to watch the world burn, and his destructiveness really stems from the fact that he's fundamentally broken, so he often thinks he's helping, trying to mimic Superman, but everything he does just goes catastrophically wrong. He causes huge amounts of damage and can be absolutely terrifying simply because he wields immense power but doesn't grasp the consequences of his actions. Number 3. Injustice Superman. And now we have this version of Superman, whose path to darkness starts with a tragedy almost beyond comprehension. You see, the Joker, in probably his most twisted scheme ever, decides he wants to truly break the Man of Steel, so he kidnaps Lois Lane. Then, using a sick cocktail of Scarecrow's fear toxin mixed with kryptonite gas, he tricks Superman. He makes Superman hallucinate, seeing Lois not as the woman he loves, but as his monstrous enemy, Doomsday. In his delusion, Superman flies her into space, killing her and their unborn child without even realizing it until it's too late. And if that wasn't enough, at the exact same moment, the Joker detonated a nuke he'd hidden in Metropolis. Superman's city is gone. Millions are dead. This utterly breaks him. Drowned in grief and guilt, Superman snaps. He crosses that line he swore he never would. He finds the Joker and murders him in cold blood. From that point on, something changes deep inside Clark. He decides that the only way to guarantee real peace, to make sure a nightmare like this never ever happens again, is to impose his own absolute order on the entire planet. He created the One Earth regime. He becomes a global dictator, ruling Earth with an iron fist. Sure, he eliminates crime, but he also crushes any opposition, any hint of freedom. Everything about this Superman is the same, except his mindset. Here, he's willing to use lethal force instantly. He doesn't hold back at all. That lack of restraint, that willingness to go all the way, arguably makes him even more dangerous in a fight than the original. On top of his own powers, he uses all the technology and allies his regime provides to watch everyone and control everything. Number 4. Black Lantern Superman. Let's talk about one of the most nightmare-inducing versions of Superman out there. And first off, this isn't the main Man of Steel we usually follow. Here, we're looking at Kal-El, the original Superman from way back on Earth 2. You might remember him as the older guy who survived the very first crisis, came back later, and then sadly met his end during the Infinite Crisis event. So, his story should have ended there. But then came Blackest Night. It was a massive cosmic horror story where the entity known as Nekron unleashed Black Lantern rings across the entire universe that brought back the dead. Not as themselves, though. They resurrected corpses as undead Black Lanterns. And yeah, you guessed it, Kal-El's body, lying dead, was targeted. He was brought back as one of Nekron's absolute powerhouses. He was sent straight to Earth to inflict maximum torment on the heroes, especially those who knew and loved him, and ultimately, to extinguish all life and feeling. His appearance is just unsettling, decayed, almost zombie-like. His flesh is visibly torn, rotting. His eyes glow with the symbol of the Black Lantern Corps, and he wears a shredded version of his familiar uniform. But it's warped, overlaid with the black and silver guard of the Corps. Most importantly, he wears a Black Lantern power ring. This artifact made him almost unstoppable. It let him regenerate from nearly any injury, create solid constructs out of black energy, and read people's emotions, seeing them as colorful auras he should exploit. Superman stands for hope, life, and love, but this creature is the exact opposite. Number 5. Ultraman. Meet Kal-El, better known as Ultraman. On his Krypton, weakness was despised. Strength was the only thing that mattered. His old man, Jor-El, wasn't some noble scientist trying to save people. He was obsessed with kryptonite, experimenting with it, seeing the green rock purely as a source of power. So when their Krypton was about to bite the dust, Jor-El didn't send his kid to Earth to be a symbol of hope. Nope, he rocketed Kal-El off to be a conqueror, basically telling him, go there and become the strongest thing on the planet. When that rocket landed, it wasn't a heartwarming scene in Smallville. Kal-El crash-landed and immediately started terrorizing the place. He ended up being raised by the Earth 3 Jonathan and Martha Kent, who in some versions are depicted as pretty awful themselves. It wasn't long before Kal-El figured out his biology was totally backward, compared to the Superman we know. That life-giving yellow sun, it actually weakens him, causing him pain. But green kryptonite powers him up. It's like his steroid, his fuel source, something he has to regularly absorb just to keep his immense strength flowing. He grew up to become Ultraman, the brutal, iron-fisted leader of the crime syndicate of America, like an evil Justice League. Ultraman is pure, unadulterated evil. There's no tragic backstory that makes you sympathize, no complex motivation beyond a raw hunger for power, dominance, and just plain cruelty. He lives and breathes the philosophy of might makes right. He's the Man of Steel turned into the Man of Slaughter. Number 6. Super Doom. Working for the biggest corporate shark, Overcorp, are 3 names you'll probably recognize: Clark Kent, Lois Lane, and Jimmy Olsen. On this Earth, they weren't reporters and photographers fighting for truth, but they were brilliant minds spearheading Overcorp's big project, the monetization of superheroes. Their grand creation was an incredibly sophisticated artificial intelligence tucked inside a super powerful robotic body. Their goal was to design the ultimate marketable superhero, Superman. But hold on, this isn't some alien from Krypton. This Superman was cooked up in a lab, or a thought robot, they called it. Now, Overcorp wasn't just planning on making one Superman. Their real endgame was mass production, churning out Superman robots for profit. And to make their star product even more potent, even more buzzworthy, they had the absolutely terrible idea to try and integrate the DNA of, wait for it, Doomsday. Yes, that Doomsday, the unstoppable killing machine. So you can probably guess what happened next. It backfired, spectacularly. The Doomsday element infected the Superman construct. It merged with the AI, corrupting the whole system from the core, twisting this would-be hero into the monstrous entity known only as Super Doom. The skin looked metallic, maybe biomechanical, often with a sickly gray or greenish tint. You might still make out the Superman S symbol somewhere in the chaos. I doubt that. Top it off with eyes that often glow with energy, and the whole structure is just designed to terrify. When we talk about Super Doom's level of evil, it's a bit different. This creature embodies the results of unchecked corporate ambition, and the sheer folly of trying to control or weaponize forces you don't understand, especially something like Doomsday.
Commie dictator!
Very well. You had your chance.
Number 7. Red Sun Superman. Well, it's time for another fun history lesson. What if Kal-El's rocket didn't land in the good old United States of America? Instead, a slight shift in its path brings it down in the middle of a farm in Soviet Ukraine, sometime back in the 1930s. So instead of Martha and Jonathan Kent teaching him truth, justice, and the American way, this Kal-El is raised completely immersed in the communist philosophy of Stalin's Soviet Union. He grows up genuinely believing in the state and in the collective good. When he finally reveals himself to the world, he's not wrapped in stars and stripes, but he's hailed as the champion of the common worker, the strong arm fighting for Stalin, socialism, and the global spread of the Warsaw Pact's influence. Now things get really interesting after Stalin passes away. Superman felt the weight of responsibility and reluctantly stepped up to lead the Soviet Union, and later on, the entire planet. He actually succeeds in building a kind of global utopia by wiping out war, poverty, disease, and crime. Sounds pretty good, right? But, and it's a massive but, this perfect world comes at a steep price of individual liberty, of personal choice. Anyone who steps out of line, anyone who dares to dissent, they're subjected to re-education, which often involves brain surgery. You weren't expecting that, were you? And his look totally reflects his background. The suit ditches the bright blue for more muted grays, accented with the Soviet red color. Number 8. Darkseid Superman. In this reality, Kal-El's escape rocket gets intercepted. Metron, one of those meddling new gods, diverts its course, sending it plummeting straight into the fiery hellscape of Apocalypse. And who finds the baby? None other than the iron-fisted tyrant himself, Darkseid. So instead of sunshine and Smallville values, Kal-El is raised from infancy, steeped in the brutal, unforgiving creed of Apocalypse. He grows up completely oblivious to his Kryptonian origins, honestly believing he's Darkseid's own son, groomed to be his heir. He becomes the ultimate warrior in Darkseid's legions, a living weapon embodying the terrifying might and sheer cruelty of Apocalypse's new gods, destined to crush worlds in his adoptive father's dreadful name. Any shred of compassion he might have had, stripped away, replaced by a deep-seated belief in absolute power and the virtue of total domination. This Superman is clad in dark battle armor, sometimes even including a menacing helmet. His whole demeanor is harsh and brutally disciplined, radiating unquestioning loyalty to his dark master. So, what kind of evil are we talking about here? He serves Darkseid willingly, fully embracing the values of tyranny, conquest, and suffering that Apocalypse thrives on. He leads armies, crushes resistance, and carries out atrocities without a flicker of regret, because that's the only reality he knows. Number 9. Clark Kent, Antimatter Universe. Believe it or not, before the Kryptonian nasty Kal-El, who became Ultraman, even showed up, there was actually a human astronaut named Lieutenant Clark Kent. So Kent's out on a space mission, and things go wrong, and he's declared dead. But his body? It's actually discovered and then reconstructed by the Quardians. If that name rings a bell, they're the anti-Green Lantern group from the planet Quard. This reconstruction process does two things. It gives him incredibly potent abilities, but it also completely fractures his mind, turning him into someone ruthless, cold, and utterly sociopathic. This newly empowered, mentally shattered Kent clawed his way up to become a major force within the Antimatter Universe's twisted hierarchy. Depending on which story you read, he might have been a significant figure before the Kryptonian Ultraman arrived, or maybe they later became uneasy allies or even bitter rivals within the Syndicate framework. You might see him rocking a modified, maybe sinister version of his old spacesuit, or perhaps something else entirely that reflects his broken mental state and freaky psychic powers. The Quardian rebuild might have left him looking gaunt, scarred, and definitely off. Think potentially glowing eyes or a strange aura when he's flexing those mental muscles. And don't expect him to wear an S or U symbol, unless he's doing it purely to mock Superman, or maybe grudgingly showing his Syndicate colors. Now, his powers are where things get really different from the Kryptonians. This Clark Kent is packing a terrifying arsenal of psychotropic and psychic abilities like telekinesis, telepathy, manipulating people's thoughts and perceptions, projecting raw mental energy blasts, and maybe even tweaking reality itself on a limited scale. These abilities are purely a result of that unique Quardian reconstruction and whatever he was exposed to out there. They have nothing to do with solar energy. And of course, at the end of the day, his basic human body is probably still a weak point compared to someone like Ultraman. Number 10. Superman DCeased. Last but not least, let's talk about maybe the most tragic fallen Superman of them all. Darkseid plays with the anti-life equation, twisting it into a techno-organic virus. And the worst part? It spreads through digital screens like phones, TVs, and computers, becoming carriers for infection. The nightmare kicks off when Cyborg, completely unaware he's carrying this digital plague, teleports back to Earth. He exposes Batman, who's looking at the Bat computer, and boom, it starts spreading like wildfire. Anyone infected turns into these mindless, incredibly violent killers, driven by nothing but this primal urge to infect everyone else. Initially, Superman is doing what Superman does best, fighting the hordes, trying to save lives, getting survivors evacuated, the usual. He's the beacon of hope in this apocalypse. But then, the unthinkable happens. During a clash with an infected Flash, Superman gets exposed. He gets infected and becomes arguably the single most dangerous creature on the entire shattered planet. He becomes a zombified version of his former self. The skin is sickly pale, decayed, often marred by weird patterns, and his eyes burning red with the raw, mindless rage fueled by the anti-life. He's responsible for countless deaths, for infecting friends and allies, just by existing in this corrupted state. Marvelous verdict. So there were 10 different takes on Superman from across DC's darker realities. As we've seen, whether through external forces, tragic choices, or fundamental differences in origin, even a character representing ultimate good can be twisted into something truly menacing. It certainly offers a different perspective on the hero we know so well. Which of these versions stood out most to you? Perhaps because of their unique origin, or how they contrast with the classic Superman? Feel free to share your thoughts in the comments below. If you found this content interesting, giving the video a like is always appreciated. And if you'd like to see more discussions like this, consider subscribing to the channel. Have a good one and be safe. Thanks everyone.